Welcome everyone to Coffee and an Interview. I'm Jacqueline Pena, and I'm here today with Nicolette Chinomona, who is a business coach and is going to talk to us about a lot of great things about understanding business and ourselves. So Nicolette, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm actually really excited that you're here with us today because you take quite an interesting approach to business coaching. And I want to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Awesome. Thank you. So basically, I'm a business coach. My major in university was in entrepreneurship, and then I went on to get an MBA. And I've always been a very creative person. Being creative has been something that's very intuitive and instinctive for me. And one of the things I discovered when I was in university is that, creativity can actually be learned, which was wonderful for me to find out because, if you're a creative person, one of the things you often encounter is, people who don't feel like they're creative saying, I wish I was like you. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. But until you know that people can learn to be creative, you don't really have a good answer to that. It's kind of like, oh, thanks for the compliment. I don't know how to help you like after that. But then, when I discovered, through my university studies on creativity and innovation, that creativity is something that people could actually learn, that was very multifaceted, I immediately thought to myself, you know what, I would like to start a business that helps people discover their creative talents, especially people who want to start businesses. And, really, when you look into the whole work around helping people become more creative, developing their ideas or their concepts, a lot of it has to really do with helping people discover who they are as people, uncover, talents that they don't even know are talents. They just think, well, that's just something that I do. So one of the things that I do when I'm working with people is also have very heavy emphasis on helping them, figure out who they are, figure out, okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then how do you then apply those strengths and weaknesses to your business? Because anyone who's running a business knows the major thing that will either derail you or help you succeed is yourself. And if you don't even understand yourself, then you're in very big trouble, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because when we talk about starting businesses or growing businesses, we never talk about the business owner or founder. We're always talking about what's your niche, what are you selling, what's your product, what's your service, how are you going to market? And we completely forget the person behind it all. So, tell us a little bit more about that. Why is that so important to understand yourself as a business owner?
Well, I think it's really because, okay, so as a business owner, you're the key asset that your business has. So whether you have got lots of money to start your business with, whether you've got contracts, whether you've got partnerships, at the end of the day, you're literally the glue that holds everything together. And if you don't understand yourself, then you're not going to be able to pinpoint or identify particular areas in which, you might be dropping the ball because maybe they're, inherent to your personality. One of the things I'll give myself as an example, I did a temperament test. So I'm sanguine choleric. My sanguine is more than my choleric. Out of the 4 temperaments, these are my 2 dominants. So these different temperaments actually have different strengths and weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses of being sanguine is we are so talkative. We talk too much. And while, some people are introverted or like, oh gosh, I wish I could just talk and talk like you, then my business would probably flourish and I'll network all the time. And I'm like, no, it can actually become a weakness because sometimes you talk people's ears off and they're actually ready to give you money, but you're still talking. So being able to understand myself in terms of understanding my temperaments and the weaknesses and the strengths that come with it have been able to really help me notice when I'm about to derail myself. One of the weaknesses of being sanguine as well is being very impatient. So when I find myself like just, chomping at the bit, that's when I'm like, okay, this is your temperament thing coming out. And maybe, this is a time when, you should find a way to either get out of the situation that you're in before you lose it, or find a way to kind of change the situation. And also in the same vein, when you know your strengths, then you can leverage those strengths. One of the strengths of being sanguine is that, we're people people, we find it so easy to make friends, chat, talk, network, navigate different social situations. And to be honest, that's really important for me as a business person, that I know that and I can leverage that. And then obviously with, let's say, my less dominant temperament, which is being choleric, one of the strengths that a choleric has is that we're very quick and decisive. So if a decision needs to be made, it's not going to be like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to go for it. So it's very important that you understand yourself. And I always say to people, being an entrepreneur is traumatizing. It's so difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's like, it is like having a child, but the child can very suddenly just die when it's a business. So it's a very long and arduous and very traumatic, experience that you go through. Very few people start a business, put some money in, and suddenly it's just like success, and part of surviving this trauma, this constant state of alertness, or this constant state of worry that you have to be in, is understanding even how you cope with stress, and how you make decisions. And there have been times, and I've had to look at myself and say, Nicolette, part of being choleric is you just push through and you do stuff, but you're actually about to burn out, and perhaps you need to just take the take your foot off the pedal and just relax a bit. So it's like, I feel that my understanding of who I am as a person, my strengths and my weaknesses, has allowed me to remain sane, as far as sanity is possible in my situation as an entrepreneur. Yes.
You just share so many amazing things, because you started talking about strengths and weaknesses, understanding them, using them, learning from them. You talked about having a business being traumatic, like giving birth to a child that could die at any point because a business might not survive. And we know the statistics are a little bit different in each country, but we know that many businesses do not survive after 5 years, small businesses. Mm. And this idea of burnout, I love this idea of using your strengths, understanding them, and play with all of this, but also your weaknesses. And as you build your team, I'm thinking, wow, if I know that this is my weakness, I can work on my weakness. I can learn these skills and work on it while I'm building a team that supplements my strengths and my weaknesses, so that together we're even more powerful in this business.
Definitely. Part of my hiring process with my team is I make everyone do a temperament test. I'm always like, well, first I want to know what demons you have. So let's figure this out. But I also tend to find that I had an amazing program manager about a year ago. She has since moved on, but I specifically chose her because she was very, very stern. If she said she was going to do something, then no matter how wishy-washy I was about it, she'd be like, Nicolette, you said you're going to do this, so you're going to do this. So it was often like, when she would walk into the office, I'd be like, oh my gosh, the boss is here. Even though I'm the owner of the company, but she really kept me like on the straight and narrow, because she really complimented my more sanguine part, which is just like, oh no, let's worry about that later. Oh, let's do that later. And she was like, no, this is what we're going to do, and you're going to do it now. And I was like, oh my God. So whenever people would come in and they're like, oh, we're looking for the owner of the business, I'd point to her and I'm like, talk to her. She's the boss around here, And it was amazing because she was all of 22 years old, but she was so organized, so knowledgeable, so focused. It was absolutely amazing.
Oh, that you just spoke to the beauty of using this for a team, but you keep talking about temperament tests. And I think it's something a lot of us don't do. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of these tests that we can use to understand our temperament, strengths, and weaknesses? And, any information about that we might not know, so that we can start using it.
Oh, no, definitely. So basically, I think psychological testing or psychometric testing has been around for a very long time. And people kind of vary in terms of their opinions on whether or not it can be considered just like a conclusive science, a conclusive fact. I always tell people when they're doing these tests that, to be honest, there's no right or wrong answer. So don't, when you're answering the questionnaire, kind of look at yourself, there'll be a word, like it'll say egotistical, rate yourself on a a scale of 1 to 5, don't be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to put that I'm egotistical, and then like 1, I'm not egotistical. It's very important for you to actually just be honest, because it's just who you are. So what I like about a lot of these tests is that, they allow us to pause and actually think about ourselves. Because I think as we go through life and we're just being us, we just move through the world and just on average just react whatever way that we feel we should react at the moment. So I find that when we go through like things like personality tests, temperament tests, that allows us to pause and just figure out and kind of notice patterns. I'd say at the very least the tests will help you identify patterns. And I always say, even when I go in with my clients and say, okay, fine, you've done the temperament test, here are a list of strengths and weaknesses. Which ones do you feel apply to you? There's none who said every single weakness in this temperament applies to me, because again, they're 4 temperaments. So just a bit of a description of them. I would say, okay, so the 4 temperaments are the sanguine, the choleric, the phlegmatic, and the melancholic. So the way that I usually describe them to people who are not really familiar with them is, when you think of choleric, think of lions, very large, in charge, decisive, you're going to follow me, I'm the leader. When you think of sanguines, think of monkeys. It's just like fun all day, fun all year round. Let's just party. When you think of melancholics, think of Eeyore, they're donkey types, just like, but very emotional, very emo, very sensitive. When you think of phlegmatics, think of bees or ants. So very, very structured, organized. I once heard this amazing description of the temperaments that, there was like a teacher who had a kindergarten class, and she gave them some putty, some clay. And she said, I want you guys to construct a toy soldier. And then she gave each group this clay dough. And then she went, and then, she came back. And then, she goes to the sanguine table. There's no clay on the table. And she's like, where is the soldier? And they're giggling. And she's like, where's the soldier? And then they look up at the ceiling, and she realizes that all the clay is on the ceiling. So that's just a really good example of like how sanguines are just like all about playing. She went to the choleric table, and these kids had basically not just done a soldier, they had an entire battalion, they had an entire battle plan of how they're going to attack and take over everything. She went to the melancholic table. The dough was still in the center of the table, but the kids were crying. They're like, why should there be war? Why do we need soldiers? This is just, this is just sad. We should all just get along. And then she went to the phlegmatics table, and they were painting on the buttons of their toy soldiers, because that's how detailed they are. So the test that I use with my clients is basically based on one by Tim LaHaye. He has one. So if you just search for the author Tim LaHaye and temperament test, you should find one that you can print off, or I can also give you at the end of this podcast a link to where you can take the one that I have. And then afterwards, you can always just email me the results, and then I can have a discussion with you about it. But yeah, it's basically just, kind of taking some time to figure out where a lot of your behavioral patterns kind of follow. Again, it's not going to be a definite thing, but when you can notice small things, it helps you grow. Like if you just notice by yourself, what? Sometimes I think I'm just a little bit impatient. Maybe I should work on that. I know that when I was 14, I noticed, I think it's either both my sanguine or my choleric, because both of them can do this. But when I was 14, I noticed that if I was in a group with my peers, I could easily convince them to do what I wanted to do, So it's like if people are like, oh, let's have pizza, let's go for burgers. I'll be like, I think pizza is a great option, and here's why pizza is great, and everyone would follow me. Yeah. And then, I came to the realization that I didn't want to be that person that always got people to do what they wanted. And so even from the age of 14, I kind of noticed this pattern in my behavior. And I thought, what, I want to become more of a team player. And so I would then make a conscious decision that when I was in a group, even though I did think I was right, most of the time, it's just part and parcel of being choleric. You always think you're right. It's like, okay, so what do you think? What would you like us to do? Inside I'm thinking, oh my God, like I should just tell everyone what to do. It's like, no. Tell me what you think, So yeah, it helps in that way.
That's a great example of using this information for team leadership and for leading groups. But I love the explanation with the kindergarten class, because it really helps me understand what you mean when you're talking about these four temperaments and how they relate to our personalities. And for all of us, when we're starting a business, we're not thinking about these things. And I know this is part of your business coaching. Start with the business owner. You're the greatest asset, as you said. And so then from there, looking at what your business looks like. Before we jump into the business side of it, now that we're transitioning out of the business owner, just so our listeners know, all the links to these resources will be in the episode description. So just scroll down, check out the description, and you'll see all these different links so you can access them right away. But Nicolette, moving on from the business owner, so you do this great work with the business owner. I, as a business owner, I definitely need to do this. I'm a little late in the game, right? The business has been running for almost 2 years, and now I'm thinking, gee, I need to understand myself better and see how that relates to how I run my business and what my business looks like and how it's growing. How do you do this with your clients? Because you start with the business owner, and then how do you morph into this concept of, let's start thinking about how to start a business. What kind of business? How should you run this business?
Okay, so like you said, I start with the owner because typically what I try to avoid is have like a very long coaching process. So I have a coaching and consultation process. The coaching part really focuses on the business owner, like you said. We look at your temperament. We also look at your life purpose. What do you feel the purpose of your life is, and does that align with your business? Because that will affect, how your business and your life gel together. Because at the end of the day, the two things are basically symbiotic. And then I also look at, what are your motivations? Like, what did you start the business being motivated by if you've already started the business? And what are you motivated by now? And it's important for most people to really take an in-depth look at this, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's going to be tough. It's going to be traumatic. So you better be doing it for the right reasons. Otherwise, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to just quit everything. And then the fourth thing that I do focus on in terms of the owners, looking at the exit plan, like how are you planning on getting out of this business? Because you're going to get out of it, whether you're going to die, or, it will fail or something, but you need to have a plan of how you're going to get out of it. I think a lot of people say, well, I'll run it until I die. Then it's like, okay, now you're dead. No more business. What happens to the clients? Like, is it just, well, she's dead. Oh, we buried her. Oh, so sorry. Goodbye, farewell. It's like you need to have a plan. If you're planning on your kids or your family inheriting it at some point, then you need to actually know that right now so that you can actually start building that into how you run your business and you set up those systems. If you're planning on reselling, you also build that into your systems. Now, in terms of the consultation part, that tends to be a 10 session program where basically we go into analyzing the business, your concept or your existing business, by going through the development of a business model canvas. So business model canvas is basically like a one-page diagram that basically outlines how you're going to be running your business, what you're going to be selling, how you're going to make money, and what you need to actually run your business. So again, the amazing thing about this tool is it's on one page. It doesn't have to be very complicated. It doesn't have to be very intimidating. And also, it's not as long as, let's say, doing a business plan, and you can use it as an auditing tool. So basically, you can do a business model canvas even way after you've started your business, just to take a bit of a look of, okay, where is my business right now? What am I doing? And then, take a fresh sheet and say, where would I like to be? And kind of compare the two. So most of the clients that I work with, to be honest, majority of them have already started a business. It's just like, it's not working, Nicolette. I don't know why it's not working. And I always say, well, can we start from the foundations? Because a business model canvas will basically help you with the foundational aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting because the first thing I noticed is you said business model and one page and not business plan. And then I'll talk a little bit about this process you already started outlining. But I think a lot of us who are not as experienced in business as that first business, we keep thinking, oh, we need an intricate business plan. It has to be 10 pages. I need a page on this and a page on that and a page on that. And just this concept of a business plan overwhelms us. And I think that we lose sight of the actual work we're trying to do in conceptualizing the business. So I like this approach of a business model versus a business plan as you're conceptualizing your future business or conceptualizing what your current business could look like.
Definitely. you will never catch me writing a business plan because I don't have time for that. I do not have time for that. It's like, who has time for that? And I actually have all the skills to actually complete one, but it's like, I'm not going to put myself through that. No. And I find that most of the clients that I work with do not have a background in business. That's the amazing thing about starting a business, is that, you can start with just a skill, a passion, something that you love to do. And, you figure that you want to make money doing this. And you can actually have a reasonable level of success if you actually just say, you know what, look, it's money in, it's money out. It's just that at particular times, may find out that, you know what, I feel like there's some concepts that I'm not really tying together and it's making me lag in my business. So what I like about the business model canvas is that it's very accessible, even to people who do not have a business education, because a lot of people be like, oh, I don't have a business education. Maybe I'm just going to stumble and fumble through running my business. But with the business model canvas, you don't need to know a lot of jargon or anything that's really complicated. I even have a really short 1-hour course on Udemy that's free that you can take, that basically takes you through the entire business model canvas, and you can just take that 1 hour and then just go off and do extra research. But it really lays down the foundations, which I think is what's really important. And when it comes to business plans, to be honest, if you're going to do a full business plan, you cannot do it without the help of other experts, because you're going to need to do financial projections, you might need to do marketing projections as well, sales plans, and that stuff that you might be like, gosh, I'm an engineer, I don't know about this. How do I figure this out? But with the business model canvas, it's really much more simplified and just gives you that kind of starting point that doesn't discourage you, because I think we already get overwhelmed when we're trying to think of a new business idea. You get this idea, then you research, and then you start trying to work on it, and then it's not working, and then you get frustrated. So imagine now if you have to write a 20-page document of this plan, which, to be honest, you're not really going to use. I mean, the average person starts a business by themselves as a solopreneur. So you're not really going to use the entire plan, to be honest.
And I think having a model, a basic plan is important, but you're right. I started this last business as a solopreneur, and now it's grown to a team. And even in that sense, you need to know the direction you're going in. You need to know what you're offering, how you're offering it in terms of a business, but you don't always need the full business plan unless you're looking for investors, major investors, for something like a large scale restaurant or something of that sort. So I do love that you differentiate between these two things, and that you start working with the business owner first and understanding that, understanding ourselves, and then moving to, okay, now let's look at your business. What does your business look like, or what will it look like? In terms of, yeah, so I mean, it's a fabulous process. And then in terms of, it's a fabulous process because we tend to leave out the business owner most times, and yet the business owner is a key asset. So in terms of the coaching you do with the small business component, the consulting, can you tell us a little bit more about what are the keys to success in starting a business or growing a business, reconceptualizing or growing a business? You already started talking about a little bit about succession planning and long-term pieces. You talked about the business model. Is there anything else that's important in this process?
I would say that you need to take time to strategize. And that's another reason why I like the business model canvas, is because it forces you to take a bird's eye view of what's happening. Because any business owner you speak to will tell you that, you know what, they are just, you wake up in the morning and then there's just a list of things. And then you're just trying to check off, exactly, trying to check off that thing, so you can get through this list as quickly as possible. And I always say that it's important for entrepreneurs and business owners to differentiate between meaningful work and busy work. So busy work is that stuff, that is that to-do list, that is, the phone calls to be made, the emails to be responded to, this is I guess I would say that very reactionary type of stuff. And then meaningful work is when you actually take the time to pause and ask yourself, am I going in the right direction? Where am I going? Where did I start? Am I still going in that direction? Because I think we get so overwhelmed, just being pulled in many different directions, that a lot of the times we don't stop to actually say, okay, I'm clearly very busy, but is my busyness meaningful in any type of way, because when you don't take that step back, you don't give yourself an opportunity to figure out, okay, maybe I should try a different strategy. Maybe there's another area of something that's not working. I'll give an example that one of the things that I do when I'm coaching is we do a lot of creativity exercises. And one of the exercises is called the 5 whys. So for instance, you'll be like, oh, a client has ended a contract. You need to ask yourself why. And then it'll be like, well, because, they were unhappy. Okay, why? Because their deliveries kept being late. Why? Because the car broke down. Why? Because we haven't been putting money aside to do car repairs. So it's very important that, you take the time to actually take a deep dive into some of these issues versus just, reacting. There are certain times when, there's a lot of chaos happening around. And I stop and I'm like, no, I'm not going to react to this. Okay, if something's going to burn, it's going to burn. But I need to pause and figure out why what has happened is happening so that it doesn't happen again. And I mean, even if you just take time once a year to say, okay, I'm going to do an audit of my business. Maybe fine, you're not going to do a financial audit, very complicated, but you're just going to say, okay, in the 5 areas of my business, whether it's sales, marketing, events, whatever it is, what were all the things that went wrong? And just make a list of all the things that went wrong that you remember going wrong in each of those particular areas. And then you ask yourself, after you've done that exercise, how can I prevent that from happening again? And then you start working some of those things out into, the plans that you have for the rest of the year. So I find this a very good exercise to do at the beginning of the year, because typically at the end of the year, we're all rushing and pushing just to get to the finish line. So it's very important to do that. At the same time, you ask yourself, what are all the great things that happened this year? And then ask yourself, how can I replicate that so that it happens again?
These are great points that you're making about taking time to strategize. And I think a lot of us are in the go, go, go mode when we launch a business. And some of us love our to-do list. I'm one of those, but they are very reactive. They are the things that maybe I could delegate, or maybe things I do need to do, but are not truly working on the business. They're just working for the business. And I think as small business owners, we have to remind ourselves, schedule that time to strategize, to think, to do internal audits, marketing, products, services, clients. And I know financial scare a lot of us, but it's important to understand what's coming in and what's going out to see if, in terms of profit, it makes sense. And that includes your own payroll, because you have to pay yourself as a business owner, but you have to pay everyone else who works with you. But I do love the strategy audit. I went into finance by mistake, but let's go back to strategy for a moment, business strategy, so we don't scare people on the money part.
But I mean, it's important. I was talking to a client recently, and I was explaining to her how to do a statement of profit and loss, basically figure out how much money you've made and, take out all the costs. And she was like, oh, this is very complicated. I was like, it's not actually, it's quite simple, but don't get intimidated by it. And I think what happens is that, a lot of people, and I think maybe this is just because, okay, this is, if you're a math teacher and you're watching this, please forgive me, but math teachers tend to be a lot more boring. Where I'm from, they're not very exciting. And so because of that, a lot of people grow up just, really uncomfortable and overwhelmed by math. And so when it now comes to finances, when it comes at looking at money, at your bank statement, at figuring out how much money you've made, a lot of people just prefer not to do that. And to be honest, look, I mean, I have a whole MBA. I do not enjoy doing the financial part, but I do it. I'm just like, you know what? I really need to just see what's happening here, because like you said, the parts of running a business, it's just one thing after another thing. So you'll find yourself spending money. And then, maybe at the end of the month, you're like, oh, wow, I had like 10 clients and I made X amount of money. But when you're looking at the bank, it's like, oh, there isn't that much, like, what's happening here? But then you're too intimidated to go in and say, oh, but one of the things I didn't do is maybe I didn't include this expense or that expense. I'll give an example. A lot of people who are working from home, let's say because of COVID or because your business doesn't need you to have a storefront, don't include rent as part of the costs that their business incur, because they're like, well, I live here. And it's like, well, your business needs to pay rent. As much as it's in your house, your business needs to pay rent, because let's say you expand one day and you need to rent out a place, then what are you going to do? Are you going to attempt to raise your prices? I mean, your customers are going to be like, wait, why are you doubling your prices? And you're going to be like, well, I need to pay rent now. They'll be like, that's not my problem. So these are some of just the little small things that, we don't really look at or consider, but very important to long-term success.
That was a great point too, because I think a lot of us start out of our homes, garages, basements. My business runs out of what used to be my dining room. It's now an office / workspace. And so it's measured by square footage. If you're in the US, you for your tax, for taxes, you have to measure your workspace to claim your office space. But I think a lot of us don't realize, if we don't take into account how much that rent really costs, and looking at our products and services, we're not going to price correctly for us to be able to make a profit.
Yeah, definitely.
So I have a list of lessons that I've been learning in this session, and I want to go into strategies, tips, advice for two groups as we start closing up our interview, to kind of summarize. The first group is those who are thinking about starting a small business. So they're at that conceptualization level. And the other group is those who already have a small business. And I might be thinking about reconceptualizing it, growing, making a shift, or just need to take time to strategize and see, am I moving in the right direction? So we have those who are in that phase of thinking about a startup, and those who have already started. So for those who are thinking about starting, what are some tips or advice based on everything we discussed that you can share with those individuals?
Okay, so this is what I would say. If anyone's thinking of starting a business, I feel like you need to be very realistic. And, everyone talks about how most businesses fail within the first year, and, most don't even make it to 10 years. I think it's important for you to consider that. And I'm not saying it's that I'm trying to burst your bubble or anything, because, I'm a cheerleader for people starting businesses. I'm like, you have an idea, let's start a business. You want to start a business, talk to me. Let's talk about it. But it's important to be realistic. And part of that is having very advanced financial planning, if you're able to. And what I'm talking about is having like a 6 months emergency account. That means that if you start your business and you don't make a sale within the first 6 months, then you have that covered at the very least. And I know some people might be like, Nicolette, that's a lot, then I might as well not start. I'm just saying it would be a good thing to do, especially if you already have a job. If you have a job, save up that money. So you're not just saving up money to start your business, you're also saving up money to provide you security just in case anything happens. And I tell you that even as somebody who's been running a business for 5 years, that's something that I still do. I have an emergency account for 6 months in advance. I am building a 6-month pantry, so that if anything happens, God forbid I can't work or something occurs, that I know that, for the next 6 months, I have something to do. I have a plan to make, because as much as you want to share, start your dream and start your business and share what you have with the world, you still need to be responsible. And this is, I think, something that a lot of people, tend to look at entrepreneurs and say, those guys are risk takers, and they're irresponsible, especially if you have people that rely on you, if you've got a family, if you've got a partner, heck, even if you've got a pet, at the very least, make sure you got 6 months of dog food there, okay, at the very least, just in case anything happens. So take very careful financial planning into consideration. I definitely believe that if you've got an idea and you're passionate about it, start the business. I love that. Again, do a business model canvas, because once you've done that one sheet, it will really help you crystallize what your idea is, or if what you've been thinking will actually work out that way. Because, business model canvas basically has 9 sections. It looks at, what's the value that you're giving. It's not asking what you're selling, because lots of people are probably selling what you're selling, but what makes you different? Why should people choose you? It has a customer section, which focuses on who's your segment, how are you going to reach out to them, how are you going to build relationships with them. It has an infrastructure section that looks at what are the key activities, what are the key things that you're going to have to do on an ongoing basis to keep your business running. Once you have those, you look at, okay, how do you even get these things like done? What are the resources that you need? Is it money? Is it people? Is it tools? Is it equipment? And then you look at your partners. Look, there's no business that is an island. Even if you're a solopreneur, you need other people to participate with you in developing your business. You might not have the time or the capacity to deliver your own products. That means you're going to need a partner or a service provider that delivers your products. You might not have the time to do your own accounting. So you might need a service provider that will help you do the account. So it's like, okay, who are the people that I need that will help my business become successful? Then there's obviously the financial end where you list all your costs. Like, what is this going to cost? What is it going to cost on a fixed term basis? So fixed costs are costs that don't change at all. That means every month they're the same. So that would be your telephone contract, your electrical bill, your rent, for instance. And then you look at costs that might change, might go up and down. This could be design costs. This could be the cost of gas that you put in your car. But it's important to think of every single possible thing that you might have to spend money on, like down to the T. And then the last section is the revenue section, where you say, okay, how's the money going to come in? So am I selling something? Am I renting something? Am I giving something away? And then, in giving it away, there's an advertising opportunity. So you really need to think of all the various ways that money can come in. And so once you finish that business model canvas, then it gives you a bigger picture. They're like, okay, I think I kind of see what my idea looks like. And the great thing about the business model canvas is that you don't have to apply to your whole business. You can also apply to particular products. If you want to launch a new product, you're like, I have this idea, maybe, then you can do a business model canvas off of that. And for people that are already in a business, look, it's a great tool to, kind of come back and kind of like look and see how far you've come. But the other thing I'll say just in passing about people that are already in businesses, there's something called a sunk cost. A sunk cost is when you have put or invested money into something and it hasn't worked out, but you are so afraid of letting go of that investment that you keep pushing in that direction because you're like, I already put $5,000 into this. I need to keep on trying with this thing. It's like, no, the money is gone. It's a sunk cost. And I find that a lot of times business owners have this feeling that, you know what, the direction I'm going in, I think I need to go in a different direction. But then they think, you know what, I've spent so much time on this. I've spent so much effort. I've put so much money into this that they just keep on trying to force it in that direction when really they should just be stopping. So I would say that, do not be afraid to stop and say, I think I'm going in the wrong direction. And perhaps I need to, kind of look back and kind of maybe, start from square one again. And I think this is also just something that humans in general have to do. I think all of us have at some point been in a relationship, which we're not supposed to be in. And it's like, I really don't want to sit down with myself and have a conversation about this relationship because I might realize that I'm going to have to drop this or end this. And again, I guess the last thing I would say is that failure is not the end. I believe that as a business owner, you're going to fail multiple times. You might fail multiple times within the same business. You might fail in other businesses. Just get up. It's part of the adventure of being an entrepreneur. I know it's traumatizing, it's painful, but when you see yourself failing, yes, take your moment to cry and mourn, and then, get up again, do the next thing, but don't give up on yourself. I think that's the key thing.
I love that you mentioned all these great points, and you told us it's not an issue. Don't be afraid to change directions, to stop pushing this product or service, to pivot your business in a different direction. But to do that, you need time to strategize, going back to what you said earlier, and take that time, apply the business model to do that analysis, to create that strategy and to determine where you're going. But I think one of the things that I heard also is failure is not the end. I think failure is maybe the end of one idea or adventure, but it's actually the beginning of something even better, because out of failure, we can create things that are better. And I grew up in a system where failure was a no-no, like you just never wanted to fail. And it keeps us trapped in a fixed mindset in some ways. It keeps us trapped with things that might not be the most effective. And if we can embrace failure, I know that sounds really scary for some of us, but if we can embrace failure and change, because maybe we're not failing, but there's something that we could do better, then our businesses can just be shaped in so many different ways for success. And I love that advice. And I love that you're tackling these things that we're afraid to do, and that you give very clear hands-on processes on how to conceptualize or change or grow a business.
Well, I'm glad that what I'm sharing is useful. Sometimes it's like I kind of feel like a mad scientist, like, oh, so this is what I've learned. I blew up my face this one time doing this thing, so don't do that. So yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like I always say that part of my journey and my purpose as a person outside of being a startup coach is I give people permission. When someone asks me, Nicolette, what do you do for the world? I say I give people permission, because a lot of the times people have ideas, they have concepts, they've got things that they want to do, but because the world has kind of geared us to want to be safe, to want to do the things that are less risky. I find that what most people get from me is they tell me the idea, and I'm like, hey, go for it. Like, why not? Like, you have permission. And I think that's what a lot of people are waiting for, because they think, what right do I have to do that thing? And then also, when you've failed, then it's kind of like, oh, well, then now everyone is going to say, I told you so. And part of what I do is say, yeah, you're going to fail. Okay, so what? Yeah, okay. It's like, oh, you failed. That's so terrible. Okay. Like, next, like, what's the next adventure? Don't dwell on it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that. What's the next adventure? Don't dwell and move on. As we come to a close with the interview today, do you have any final thoughts, advice, or would you like to share anything that I didn't get a chance to ask you?
Well, I'd like to say that being realistic is very important, but at the same time, while it's important to be realistic, you also need to be inspired, and you need to live a life that is inspired. And sometimes you can't plan for everything. I'm just going to be honest. If we want to find safety, we can plot and plan and strategize as much as we want. Sometimes, life isn't going to go the way that we want it to go. But the key thing is that we need to give ourselves a break, allow ourselves to grow from what has happened. And part of that is recognizing if we have particular traits that, cause us to really bear down on ourselves, be overly critical of ourselves. Sometimes you say, oh, we're perfectionists. And it's kind of like, okay, you're a perfectionist. I know. And I'm a perfectionist to a certain point. Then it's like, well, where does that come from? What is the root cause of that? And is it that, do I want to live my life in this constant state of perfectionism? So I would say it's very, very important to be realistic, but at the same time to live an inspired life, and at the same time to be very introspective. Like, take some time to sit with yourself, which I think is something that a lot of people don't want to do. Whether you succeed or fail as an entrepreneur, whether you get the results that you want, it's all going to be on you, not on anyone else. So I can give an example that you can, maybe say, oh, I want to be a millionaire one day. That is your goal. Whether or not you'll be happy as a millionaire is on you, because, it's very important for you to analyze your motives, because again, your business is one thing, but you as a person, you're also, another thing. And I feel like, the sweet spot for entrepreneurs is when we achieve our financial goals, but those financial goals also align with our personal goals. You don't want to be that millionaire who has sacrificed their family, their friends, all the important relationships in their lives. But I'm a success. I'm a millionaire. I'm a billionaire, So be introspective, even with your own desires or with your own fears, take some time to even turn that around. We've talked about strategizing for your business, taking a bird's eye view. It's also important for you to take a strategic perspective and a bird's eye view of who you are as a person, and be honest with yourself. If you're prone to pushing people away, or to, living a life of making decisions where the means justifies the end, and you know that you know that that's not who you want to be, then you also need to sit down and do that work, because you want to build a great business, but you also want to build a great life. And life is not just business. So it's important to be realistic, inspired, and introspective as well.
Love this advice. Thank you. Because I think we focus so much on the business or the job or this or that, and we forget to focus on living an inspired life. It's not just the work, it's our lives. And I love that your approach combines the business owner and the business. So I think a lot of times we just focus on the business and we don't include both, and we don't merge them because they truly are interconnected. So this is definitely inspiring. It's perfect timing as I plan for 2022 for my own business. But I think anyone listening, whether you're thinking about starting a business, whether you work in a business, or whether you want to pivot or grow or change or strategize for your business, I think all of us can get so much out of this interview today. So Nicolette, thank you so much for joining me today for Coffee and an Interview. It's been an amazing pleasure getting to know you and learning so much from your process.
Thank you very much for having me. I love this. This was an amazing conversation.
Yep, definitely inspiring. Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, again, all the resources are in the description. Doesn't matter which platform you use. You might be able to click on the link, or you might have to copy and paste into a browser, but you'll see all these resources listed in the description for this episode. And thank you for listening to Coffee and an Interview.